Hello folks, Alex here. This is Alex Unabridged, and today I've got my top 10 plays. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, today it's time for the top 10 plays. A little bit of theatre, darlings. Probably more than a little bit, actually. I think this could potentially be a long one. So grab yourself a tea, a coffee, probably some sustenance, and buckle in. Because I think when I get going on plays, I'm probably going to get going on plays. So yes, this one was an incredibly difficult list to do because as I started looking back over my my history with plays and drama, I realised quite how many I'd read, and it's definitely more than the amount of fiction and non-fiction combined easily. So yes, so there was a lot to go through, and there's also a lot I love. I do absolutely adore plays and theatre. I used to work in theatre. The theatre was my life basically for sort of 15 years when I was younger. So there's there's stakes in this. So yeah, that's something to know actually going into this is my background in theatre was as a techie mainly. I've held many jobs in theatre, but mostly sort of technical management, that kind of thing. I've done stage management, props, special effects. I've also worked as a designer, and mostly as a lighting designer, and sort of electrician was my speciality. But I've also done set design and construction. There's basically, there's not that many jobs in theatre that I haven't done at some point, notably costume and like front of house marketing, that kind of stuff. I've never really been involved with that, but yeah, it's all been the techie stuff. And so reading plays for me is very much as much as I love the words on the page, it's about realizing that in the visual form, as in a theatre production. So when I read plays, I'm also looking at how I would produce them, how I would direct them, how I would design them, etc. And it's kind of an exercise in imagination of what would I do with this piece. And I love imagining that world, how to literally build that world on stage. So yeah, that is a factor in what's made it onto the top 10. My work in theatre production is definitely plays a huge role in informing which ones I love the most. But I have to like them as a script as well, as a piece of in their written form as well. So yeah, so some of the plays on this list are purely for the words on the page, though most of them are ones that I have seen a production or productions of over the years, and a lot of them I have been involved in a production at some point as well, because as I say, bringing them to life is something special for me, and kind of solidifies them, my love for them. In terms of how they've ended up on the top 10 on this list. But quite honestly, I could have quite easily done like a top 20, but I won't, because we'd be here for hours, I should think. So yes, I will though, however, start with some honourable mentions. These are the ones that I just, I ummed and ahed over whether to get them into the top 10 or not, but they've just missed out. But I do still love them dearly. So I shall quickly go through some honourable mentions. So the first one is Macbeth by Mr. William Shakespeare, of course. And I didn't put this in because I do have, spoiler alert, a Shakespeare on the list already. and I was trying not to kind of double up on playwrights too much. I have done it once, but that is with one of my absolute favourite playwrights. So yes, Macbeth. I love it as a as one of the darker plays, Shakespeare plays. I've seen some amazing productions of it. I think it's one that can be updated in terms of its staging really well, and it's a nice short one. And I do tend to like the shorter Shakespeares, but yeah, I do love it. I think it's a fantastic, really engaging play. Another honourable mention is a play called 10 Days on Earth by Ronnie Burkett, and this is puppetry. Ronnie Burkett is absolutely incredible master puppeteer from Canada, and 10 Days on Earth was one that I saw many years ago in Manchester, and it was just magical, absolutely magical. It's one of my favourite theatre going experiences, and that's why it's kind of in the honourable mentions as opposed to in the top 10. I think is because I've never actually been able to read the script. I don't even know if the script actually exists in it, in a printed form, and it is just Ronnie Burkett, just himself on a purpose-built stage, operating all the marionettes himself, wrote the script himself, voices it all, and it's just one of those experiences that I cannot get out of my head. So yes, so that's why it's gone on the honourable mentions. Another honourable mention is the short plays, plural, of Samuel Beckett. So things like Not I and Come and Go, Rockabye, the shorter pieces. I do really like Beckett, but I find a little bit of Beckett goes a long way for me. I like plays like Endgame and Waiting for Godot, but I struggle with them as well. They're a lot of work, and so yeah, so I definitely wouldn't put them in a top 10, or even close, to be honest. But the Beckett shorts I do really like. I find them a lot more manageable. So those have gone into the honourable mentions, and the final one of the honourable mentions is one that was in the top 10 until very recently, but I had to bump it for something that I was going backwards and forwards on things, and I had to bump it for something else. So this basically is number 11, and that is A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams, a play that I absolutely adore. And yeah, as I say, I was kind of disappointed I couldn't quite get it in the top 10. But it's a special one to me, just in terms of I love the aesthetic, I love the characters, I love the writing in it, but also because there's another play that kind of goes hand in hand with it for me, which is a play called Belle Reprieve, which is a kind of queer deconstruction, reimagining of a streetcar named Desire, which was done by Split Britches and Blue Lips, both of which are queer theatre companies. I think it was in the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s, and there is a script of that. I've never been able to see it, but there is a script of that, and I do love that script as well. And yeah, as I say, those two plays, obviously they go hand in hand. And so yeah, that is my honourable mentions. So now we can get into the top 10 proper. So in at number 10 is, I have it right here, The Crucible by Arthur Miller from 1953. Absolute classic of 20th century American literature and theatre. So I've seen this several times, and I've been involved in productions of it twice. So yeah, I know this one reasonably well, although I've not read it for years. But it's one that's always stuck with me. It is a dramatised sort of version of the story of the Salem witch trials, which took place in Massachusetts in late 17th century, very late 17th century. And you know, it's looking at the damage that is caused by false accusations, and is an allegory of McCarthyism. When, you know, in the 50s, when the United States government, you know, kind of went after people that they accused of being communists, and you know, sort of subversive people, generally. There was a witch hunt, essentially, in America in the 1950s. Yeah, this follows a small group of girls who cry out against people within the community, accusing them of witchcraft, to cover up their own misdeeds, basically, to cover up their own dabblings with witchcraft and the occult. And, you know, kind of as a way of, I think, you know, certainly for Abigail Williams, the leader, as a way of kind of getting back at people that, you know, she has personal grievance against. So yeah, the girls' accusations kind of build and build, and they cause a court to be formed to investigate these are kind of alleged crimes of witchcraft, and lots of innocent people end up caught up in this, and you know, that a lot of innocent people end up being convicted, and of course conviction means death, generally in this case. So yeah, it really does kind of explore how, you know, sort of what starts as potentially a small lie can just build and build and build until, you know, everyone in a community is under suspicion. So yeah, I mean, I love this because, I mean, to start with, you know, the setting of it. I've always been, you know, from being a kid, been fascinated with the history of witchcraft and of the occult. You know, both in the US and in the UK. We've got some fascinating history in the UK. But again, you know, sort of learning about the parallel history in terms of McCarthyism just made it all the more powerful. It's got some fantastic characters in it, Abigail Williams in particular, who is a right piece of work. There are some fantastic scenes in this. It's all very engaging. There are, you know, but there are a couple of scenes which I find just particularly chilling. One in the end of Act One, when this hysteria kind of has built and this really starts to kick in, and the girls just start accusing person after person after person of witchcraft. Just all of these names just coming out, you know, and you just think, you know, the amount of innocent people that are going to be caught up in this. And they're doing that, as I say, to save their own skins, the girls. And the scene in the courtroom as well in Act 3, I think is fantastic, when Abigail really starts to turn on people, you know, quite viciously, including some of the girls that she has, you know, kind of been leading, and, you know, and anybody who speaks out against her, or might even suggest that she's lying or that she's got it wrong somehow, she turns on. Yeah, that scene again is particularly chilling. I think it really stands up today still. It's a powerful message about the real power of false accusations and the consequences. And yeah, it's just one of those that, they say, the productions that I've been involved in were really engaging to be a part of. You know, it's a really interesting play to put on. And say those chilling scenes are, you know, that they never get old. I have to say, those are the scenes where I can watch them again and again and again as you kind of operate the show. And for one of those productions, I was deputy stage managing, so I was calling all the technical cues during the play. And the scene in the courtroom in Act 3 particularly, I looked forward to seeing it every night. It was one of those where it was just, you know, it was so powerful. So yeah, great experience with this. Absolutely love it. And that is my number 10. In at number 9 is a play called Better Times by Barry Keith from 1985. I don't know how well known this one is actually. I've both read it and been part of a production on it as kind of a technical manager, yeah, this one is it's a piece of political theatre really, and historical theatre. It's a celebration of and kind of a biography, if you like, of George Lansbury, who was a British politician and campaigner, activist, and the grandfather of Angela Lansbury, and his involvement, along with other councillors of the Poplar Council, a London council, in the Poplar Rates Rebellion of 1921. And this was basically where the Poplar Council, which was a district council, so a small council, were told by the larger County Council of London that they had to increase the tax rates on people in their district. And the district was already like experiencing, severe poverty. It was an extremely deprived area. And so they basically refused to do this. They openly and actively protested against this demand. They marched. They were taken to court by London County Council, and they marched, in protest to the courthouse. But they were ultimately sent to prison. 30 councillors were sent to prison, men and women, including a pregnant woman, and one of the women who was sent to jail, who was actually George Lansbury's daughter-in-law, died of pneumonia that she'd contracted in prison. They were released after 6 weeks, and a bill was rushed through Parliament that went some way to equalise the tax burden between rich and poor. Lansbury was kind of hailed a hero along with the other councillors, but Lansbury won a seat in Parliament after that in 1922, and he held that for the rest of his life. And this is, it is basically that story. It's following Lansbury and the group of councillors and the revolt, the rebellion against these tax rises. I love this because it's just a really good, warm portrayal of a part of British political history that is really important. It's because it's based on factual events. It really does. It shows the power of collective action, and the commitment of a small group of people can really actually make a difference to a cause. It's quite a funny script, which is a really good balance to some of the more serious themes in the play, and it kind of furthered my interest and kind of perpetuated my interest in the political history of the early 20th century in the UK, the political history, particularly like the Labour movement, which is what this is all about, and and the suffrage movement as well. Lansbury was a campaigner for the votes for women, and these are things that I found interesting for most of my adult life, but more so even since I moved to Manchester, sort of in, I think it was about 2008 or something like that, because Manchester has that kind of history here too. There is a strong history of sort of Labour and sort of socialist politics of the early 20th century, and Manchester still remains to this day quite a left-wing city, and a city which has a history of kind of resistance, protest, etc. And yeah, this is just a really warm human telling, human portrayal of that rebellion, that period of history, and really kind of focuses on the people as much as the kind of the history. And so just again another one that I could quite happily watch again and again and again, and one, as I say, one that just furthered my interest in that kind of subject matter. So that is my pick for number 9. In at number 8 is Beautiful Thing by Jonathan Harvey, which was, the play was 1993, but it was then quite quickly converted into a screenplay for a film that came out in 1996. I have read the play. I think I saw the film first, then I read the play, and then I've seen the play as well. And it's a coming out story. It's about a friendship and then ultimately a romance between two working class lads from a London council estate called Jamie and Stee. It was a landmark play, really, when it came out for the sort of the gay theatre world in the UK. It was the time of it was Section 28 was still law in the UK. For anybody who doesn't know what Section 28 was, it was introduced, I think, in 1988 as an amendment to the Local Government Act of 1986, that stated that a local authority, and this quote, shall not intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality, or promote the teaching in any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. So it was a pretty damaging law. It caused a lot of confusion in schools about what could and couldn't be said by teachers. And it kind of forced a lot of sort of LGBT plus support groups to kind of limit their activities or self-censor, or in some cases actually force them to shut down. And just from a personal perspective, it was a damaging thing, because it was one of those laws that kind of makes you question your value, makes you question kind of, oh, am I all right? I know my sexuality is not straight. What's wrong with me? It was one of those kind of laws, and because of Section 28, there wasn't a huge amount of information obviously out there to say, no, this is fine, this is totally acceptable, you're not wrong, you're not ill, you're not a deviant. There wasn't anything like that, so it kind of made it much more difficult to kind of gain that acceptance, self-acceptance. So that was around at the time. The age of consent for gay men was 21, and this is about two teenage lads. The debate was going on at the time in the House of Lords about reducing the age of consent. I think they were thinking about 18, or not 16, I don't think, at that stage, but they were talking about 18. But the tone of the debate was not good. It was like they were focusing on the sex side of things. They were focusing on like the sex acts that were associated with gay men, and rather than looking at the human side of it, and the fact that it's relationships are often about love as well, and they weren't treating it in a sort of a human way, and it was pretty horrible. And the mainstream representation of certainly of working class gay men was really narrow and was really negative. And this play was different. This play was celebratory. It's a play about falling in love, essentially. It's not about any specific sexual act. It's about coming to understand yourself and other people, and about a connection between two people, two human beings, two young human beings. The representation of the gay relationship was far more human. And for a kid like me who came out as gay in 1997, it was a really, really uplifting play and film. You know, I wasn't coming out, you know, at that stage I wasn't coming out as, you know, as a gay man. I was coming out as a gay woman at that stage. And nor did I share the backgrounds, the working class background of the two main characters. But it wasn't about that. It was about seeing a portrayal of a gay relationship that said this is just as valid. And you know, it was flying in the face of Section 28. And Harvey was a teacher when he wrote this. That was an interesting thing. Harvey was a teacher, and so would have come across this kind of conflict, I should think, in school, you know, of not being able to talk about gay relationships as something that is valid and, you know, totally acceptable, totally natural. And yeah, it flew in the face of Section 28 by portraying this relationship as just as valid as straight relationships, and just as beautiful. And so that was really powerful to me, and it did have a huge impact on me. It had a huge impact on my own acceptance, my self acceptance, and also, you know, acceptance of you know, all my worries about, you know, being accepted by others, because whilst there is, you know, some people in the play, that some characters in the play that don't like what's going on, there's also a celebration of it from other characters. There's also there is an acceptance, and so yeah, it's for me it's a very personal one. This, I think, it's one that will always stick with me as a kind of a really important piece of literature and theatre, to the young me, definitely. So that is my pick for number 8. In at number 7 is Crave, which I have here, by Sarah Kane. And this is one of 2 Sarah Kane pieces that I have on this list. This one is it's very difficult to say what it's about, or at least it is and it isn't. It's a difficult one when you read it to kind of to sort of discern. To start with, it just has 4 characters, A, B, C, and M, and there is absolutely no character description given in the text. Just, you know, A, B, C, and M. That's all you get. We're not told anything about them, and we're left to deduce their kind of relationships to each other and, you know, their own characters throughout the play. Generally, I think they've been played when it has been produced as 2 men and 2 women. And I know Kane did reveal in an interview that they did have the names, the use of the letters for the names did have specific meaning to her, but that she didn't want to put anything down in the play text, because she didn't necessarily want them to be too fixed. She wanted to allow a director to interpret. So I think that, you know, as the play goes on, that it becomes quite clear who they are and what their relationships are to one another. But to start with, you are never sure who's addressing who, you know, who they are. But yeah, the conversations or sort of conversations can be discerned as the sort of the narrative plays out. The structure of it is, I mean, it's a departure from Kane's earlier work, which was generally, you know, kind of epitomised in-your-face theatre in terms of it was very graphically violent. This is much more poetic, and it doesn't have the staged violence that some of her early work does. And in fact was printed under, you know, when first produced, it was produced under a pseudonym, to try and, you know, avoid any kind of expectations from the audience going in, you know, because her earlier work had been so had become so infamous. But yeah, this whilst it's a departure in terms of its sort of structure and and the way that it's presented, the themes are still dark. It is a dark play. There is some. It is challenging. It's a challenging piece in terms of its content, and it's kind of challenging to talk about in some respects. This, it's the themes in it as you kind of move through it. I always found myself getting kind of swept up in the beauty of the language, and there is some absolutely incredible writing in this. That kind of, when you start to actually discern who the characters are and what the relationships are and things like that, it kind of makes the themes more challenging, more disturbing. There is a discussion of, or the themes in it, are of things like abuse, paedophilia, incest. There's sexual abuse, and also eating disorders, and there's suicide, things like that. So it is challenging stuff, but it's written so beautifully, and I think with such humanity that it's not shock tactics or anything like that. It is just challenging material. As I say, I mean, there are some incredible sections of writing in this. There's a couple of longer bits, monologues really, which just, kind of still get me there when I read them. There's, it's lyrical. It's very powerful writing. It's poignant. It can be quite savage sometimes in its let's say both theme and language, but there's a dark humour to it as well, which I think Kane could do very well as a playwright, and it is dark, but it helps with your kind of with making it human. I really like the puzzle of this as well, that trying to figure out who these people are, what are they dealing with, who has a relationship with whom, whether that relationship is good or destructive. It reads kind of like a poem of sorts on the page, and it's one of those that sort of from a directorial perspective, when I put my kind of director hat on, I do always kind of think, how would I stage this? Because there's notes on how the text should be delivered, in terms how the speech should be delivered, but not necessarily stage direction in terms of setting and all that kind of stuff. You don't get really any of that. I saw a rehearsed reading of it when I saw it. It was part of a Sarah Kane revival season in the early 2000s, when I got a chance to see various Sarah Kane works, and I think that this one works really well as a rehearsed reading, actually, because it is essentially just conversations, or kind of it's speech primarily. It's human speaking. You don't need a lot of extra stuff there. You don't even need a setting, I don't think. And so I think rehearsed reading is a really good way to experience it. But I think likewise it's one that you can read quite easily in terms of it. You don't need to have. There's nothing you need to visualize in terms of the setting. It is much more about the poetry of the writing, if you like. It's about the content of the writing, the dialogue, the monologues, etc. It is an incredible piece of work in my eyes, but I'm very conflicted about it, like I am with most in-your-face theatre things, and particularly Sarah Kane's pieces. I love it, but it's uncomfortable. It's all Kane's stuff is always uncomfortable to read. It's meant to be. That's the point of it. She was dealing with dark themes, with difficult themes, and I think that's the power of it for me, is that I can still find this so beautiful as a piece of writing, despite the fact that it is, in parts extreme, in some ways extremely dark. So yeah, it's one where I can't say that I like it. Oh, I wouldn't. Well, I can, but it's like I wouldn't kind of go and see it and say, yeah, I enjoyed that. It's not that kind of experience. It challenged me, and it made me think, and it's still, I'm still kind of in awe of the writing in a lot of, in a lot of respects. And I've reread it recently while I was doing this, prep for the top 10, and it still hits hard. It really does still hit hard. So yes, so that is my pick for number 7. In at number 6, we've got something completely different, and an absolute classic, and that is Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare. Good old Bill, from somewhere around the 1602-ish, 1604-ish. I've seen dates for. I've read this multiple times. I've seen it multiple times. And I've produced it twice as well. I've stage managed it, and I've also been chief electrician for it. It's a rom-com. It's a great rom-com. It's, the central plot focuses on sort of mistaken gender kind of comedy, if you like, and love story. There's a pair of twins are shipwrecked, and we follow mostly Viola, who believes her brother Sebastian, her twin brother Sebastian, to have died in the shipwreck. And she's shipwrecked on an island called Illyria. And she disguises herself as a man and calls herself Cesario, and becomes part of the court of a duke called Orsino. And she falls in love with him. But Orsino is in love with someone else, a countess called Olivia. And he's trying to woo Olivia. He sends Cesario to Olivia to kind of, to do his bidding, if you like, to try and woo her on his behalf. But on meeting Viola as Cesario, Olivia falls in love with him, her, mistakenly thinking that Viola is a man. And so I love the kind of the mistaken gender kind of side of things. I think it's a great kind of, comedy of errors, if you like. But the bit that I love the most, and what really makes this my absolute favourite Shakespeare, is the subplot, the B plot, if you like, which is, essentially some, clowning in some respects, which follows Sir Toby Belch, Sir Andrew Aguecheek, and Maria, and the tricks that they play on the very prissy, proud Malvolio. And I think that side of it is some of the best comedy that Shakespeare's written. For me, it always makes me laugh. When I've seen productions of it, those are the bits that I could just watch over and over again. I saw a production of it at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester a few years ago, and it was one of those where I wanted, as soon as it had finished, I wanted to go and book a ticket and go straight back in again, because the comedy of it was just so enjoyable. I smiled all the way through that production. So yeah, I mean, I love the language in this. I love some of the lines in it. You've got some great lines. You've got, the be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and others have greatness thrust upon them. And you've got, if music be the food of love, play on. That's another one from here. And better a witty fool than a foolish wit. So yeah, I really like some of the language in it, some of the lines you get from this. I find it very accessible, this one. I was never a Shakespeare fan before I saw this and read this. I'd only ever done Shakespeare at school, We'd done Romeo and Juliet, which was okay, but I just kind of, reading Shakespeare for me, it's meant to be seen as much as it's meant to be read. And I think certainly as a kid, it really helps you understand the language when you see a good production of it. And yeah, Romeo and Juliet, we didn't really get to see a production of it. And then the one I had to do for GCSE was the Merchant of Venice, which I really struggled with. So I just kind of, I don't like Shakespeare. And then I found this, and I kind of went, no, I do like Shakespeare. Just got to find the right ones. So yeah, it's I think it's a great one for like newbies to Shakespeare as well. It is really accessible. It's quite short. It's punchy. There, as I say, there's some great sort of poetic language, Shakespeare's poetic language in it, but also just, as I say, some fantastic comedy. Just some great characters in it. And yeah, for me, it's the perfect rom-com. It really is. That's I can't really say much more than that. It's just a thoroughly enjoyable read and particularly watch. And I'm not generally a fan of the romantic comedy, certainly when it comes to films and things like that. But yeah, this one, it's never going to get old. It really isn't. I will go and see pretty much any production of this, when I get the chance. So yes, that is my pick for number 6. In at number 5 is one that I ummed and ahed about putting on this list. And that is This House by James Graham from 2012, which I have seen twice and read. And the reason why I ummed and ahed about putting it on the list is because I know James Graham. I was at university with James. He was a pal of mine from university. And so I kind of had to question myself on this one in terms of, do I love this because it's James's play? Or, do I love it because actually it's just a great play? And yeah, I've come down on the side of, it's just a great play. It really is, I think a modern classic. And James has gone on to write some incredible, other stuff as well, screenplays, musicals, that kind of stuff. He's one of our kind of top British modern playwrights now, and that's amazing. But this was his kind of first big one. This was on one of the this was on at the National. And it was his first proper big piece, and it's based on true events that occurred between 1974 and 1979 in the House of Commons. It is, again, political theatre. I do like a bit of political theatre. These years were very tense in British politics. The Labour and Conservative whips had to work really hard to defend or remove the government, respectively. It was there was a lot of tumultuous stuff happening in the country, and I think probably in the world, but certainly it was, as I say, it was a very tense, unsettled period of politics. The 1974 election, its February election, had produced a hung parliament, so no one party had a majority to govern, and would then struggle to pass laws. And that deadlock led to another election later that year, when the Labour government managed to gain a majority of one seat. Again, meaning that the whips really had to work overtime to ensure that every Labour MP voted whenever the government needed to win a vote, which could have been several times a day, on various different issues. And then the situation got worse between 74 and 79, with this, very slim majority, because the Labour government started to lose MPs in by-elections, and also through defections to other parties. And they were finally defeated in a vote of no confidence, defeated by one vote in 1979, which then ushered in the Thatcher government, which then obviously kind of was the government throughout the 80s and into the early 90s. And I mean, that to me is a fascinating period of political history anyway. I mean, I do tend to like the periods of history where there is quite a lot of tension and upheaval and stuff. It's, you know, it kind of makes history exciting, political history particularly. But it has interesting parallels, and I think this is why, you know, James picked this time to kind of write it. It has interesting parallels to the politics and the political situation that we were living through at the time. I mean, it was, as I say, it was first done in 2012, but in 2010 we'd had a general election that had produced a hung parliament, which resulted in 5 days of tension for us living through that at the time. We had 5 days of no government, whilst the backroom deals and negotiations were all going on. There wasn't really any chance of a minority government being formed, and there ended up being the coalition government between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. And so the kind of both the tension between these two periods of history, there was parallels, and the hung parliament and the backroom deals and all that kind of stuff. And then even beyond that, when you get into what it's like operating in a coalition, there are deals and power plays going on and stuff like that behind the scenes. It's a really funny play. It's got really fast-paced dialogue. It's incredibly engaging. It's a human portrayal of the characters. We can, I think, politicians. There's a very particular way that mainstream media looks at politics, and this is a very different portrayal. It portrays some of the game playing, backstabbing, deal making that went on, behind the scenes in Parliament. It's interspersed with music as well, which makes for a slightly absurd quality to it, but it works. And it shifts the focus from the big players, if you like, from people like the Prime Minister and the Cabinet and leader of the opposition, etc. It shifts the focus from them to some of the lesser known members. The whips. It's about the whips. And so, they might be known less in terms of mainstream, but they're nevertheless really influential people in that period of politics. It, as I say, it explores a much more human side to politics than we get in the sort of media representations. It explores ideas around class. You think like back in the 70s, the Labour Party was a lot more kind of still on the sort of trades unionist sort of side. You get a lot of working class MPs, and so there's explorations around class. There's looks at themes of sort of the roles of women in 1970s Westminster, and the visibility of women in that period of politics. Which again is very interesting, and as you might imagine, not great. It wasn't great for women back then. I think it's just a really accessible, fun piece that kind of actually packs more of a punch than you think it might when you're watching it or reading it. I think it stayed in my brain for quite a long time, and again it's another one that kind of inspired me to go and learn more about that period of politics of the 70s, but also the workings of Parliament at large, kind of I at that point I knew quite a bit about the American system. I'd got quite obsessed with learning about the American sort of political science, political processes, and how the government works. But I was actually woefully ignorant in terms of my own knowledge of my my own government's kind of workings, how Parliament worked, and so it kick-started that kind of, oh yeah, this is really interesting, this is intriguing, so yeah, in that respect it's quite inspiring, but yeah, I think it's a fun piece, it's an informative piece, and it's one that I think has a lot of value, whether whether you know the stuff or already in terms of what went on, or certainly for school kids and stuff like that. I think it could be a really interesting piece to do in schools, or to look at in schools. So yeah, just as I say, really a real good one for sort of both entertainment and education and just thought. So that is my pick for number 5. In at number 4 is The Woman in Black by Stephen Malatrat, which is an adaptation of the Susan Hill novel, and the adaptation was from 1987. I've read this, but I've seen it I think 4 or 5 times. I've kind of lost track. It was one that there was a time when I used to travel down to London a lot more, and basically any chance I got I would go and see it. And it kind of feels timely to talk about this one now, because it is, as this video goes out, it will have just shut. It'll have just done its last performance after, I think it moved to the Fortune Theatre where it's been on, mostly, I think, in 1989. So that's a long run. That's a long run. And yeah, I'm kind of sad that I'm not going to get to see it again. Because it's been a few years since I've seen it, but yeah, this is one where this is very much more about the I love the script, I love the story, and the way it's adapted, but it's about how it's presented in the theatre. So this one is very much more about kind of the play in action as opposed to just the play on the page. In terms of why I love it. So the adaptation is set in an empty Victorian theatre, where one of our main characters, Arthur Kipps, has hired an actor to help dramatise the story he wants to tell. And the actor, who's a younger man, plays Kipps as a young man, and the older Kipps plays all the other parts and narrates the story. And it's the story of, strange and terrifying happenings that Kipps experienced earlier in his life, when he went to sort out the estate of an elderly and reclusive widow, Mrs. Drablow. Strange happenings that involve a ghostly apparition, the titular woman in black. This is horror theatre. I think that that's why I love it so much. It's a ghost story. It's the kind of horror theatre that's it's about jump scares and about tension and kind of shivers, and it's fun horror theatre. There are other pieces of theatre I know, so, as I say, some of Sarah Kane's stuff and the In Your Face stuff, which could be classed as horror theatre, but that's because of its darkness and its challenging kind of themes and how challenging it is to watch. This is pure fun, absolute pure fun. It's definitely as much about the staging as it is about the text, and seeing it is the way to experience it. This is not one where I'd say, oh yeah, go read the script. I think if you like the sound of the story and you haven't read it, I would say read the original, read the Susan Hill novel. I think it'd be interesting to read the script and the novel and kind of look at the difference in presentation, but it's not one where I'd say, if you want to experience the story, read the text. This was, as I say, this was about an experience of seeing it, seeing the play in action. The effects work in it was amazing in terms of how simple it was. There's no newfangled technical kind of effects in it in that respect. It's good stock traditional staging effects, things like the use of gauze to kind of suddenly make things appear. The woman in black in it, the actor who played the woman in black, when I saw it, each time I saw it, was fantastic. No lines. It's all about presence. And yeah, it was terrifying the first time I saw it, but not to the point where I was overwhelmed with terror, but just, as I say, just like creepy and jumpy, and yeah, all the good stuff of horror. I first saw it. I first saw it when I went as a member of staff with a school trip. My first job out of university was working as a technical manager for a big new like theatre sort of and concert kind of complex on a private school down in Winchester, and we had a really good head of drama there who wanted to take the kids out to lots of stuff theatre wise, and this was one of the first things that we went to. And yeah, I remember Janie, the head of drama, saying to me, "You need to sit on the end of a row." We were in the stalls, and she said, "Yeah, you need to sit on the end of a row." And I kind of went, "Okay." And yeah, unbeknownst to me, the woman in black just kind of suddenly appeared in my peripheral vision, kind of almost floated down the aisle, like right next to me, and my heart stopped. It was like, the fair play to the actor. She moved so well that it really did look like she just floated down. And yeah, some of the kids, I think it was a bit much for some of the kids. I think they were probably about 13 or 14, the ones we took to it. The poor kid next to me basically spent the entire show just like gripping my arm for dear life. But I kind of knew how she felt. I had to put on a brave face because I was a member of staff. But yeah, it was scary. I mean, the sound effects in it make it very scary. The sound design was excellent. And as I say, some of the theatre effects, like the gauze and things appearing and disappearing very quickly, and a rocking chair effect where an empty rocking chair just starts rocking out of nowhere in a nursery as well. It was like, it's very, very, very creepy. Yeah, it was one of those where when I came out of it, it was just like the feeling of the adrenaline and just the fun, and again just trying to figure out all how they did everything and all that kind of stuff was just joyful. It was just one of those joyful experiences. Yeah, I mean, the setting of it's fantastic. It's set in an old Victorian theatre, and you are in an old Victorian theatre. And the set is minimal in terms of it presents it as an old Victorian theatre, a theatre that's kind of dark. So that works really well. It really places you in the setting as the audience. So yeah, as I say, this one is purely about the experience, but it can't not be on my top 10 plays because it is still one of those kind of most memorable experiences in the theatre that I think if it ever pops up again, if it, getting produced again in one of sort of the Victorian theatres that we still have around in the UK, then I will be there to see it. Absolutely, I do hope that somebody puts it on again because it is a cracking piece. So yes, that is my pick for number 4. In at number 3 is Blasted by Sarah Kane. So the second Sarah Kane that I have on this list, and this one is from 1995. I read this first, and then I've seen it twice. Once in the revival season that I talked about of Sarah Kane's work, and another time by a company called Grey Eye, who are a theatre company led by disabled actors. Incredible theatre company, do some really, really interesting productions of stuff. So yeah, the play is set in an expensive hotel room in Leeds. It's a three-hander, so you've only got the three characters. You've got Ian, who is a very foul-mouthed, middle-aged tabloid journalist, and Kate, who's a young woman that Ian's brought to the hotel room for the night. Kate's a lot younger than Ian. She's quite emotionally fragile, and seemingly has some learning difficulties as well. And then there's the soldier is the third character, and it's all set in this hotel room. The first half of the play is much more of a kind of a naturalistic sort of setting, until a bomb goes off, and the room is blasted apart. And then it becomes a much more sort of stylized piece. It's a challenging one, this. It's a really challenging one. This is one where I did, again, and ah about, where to, I knew it had to go in the top 10, but where to put it. And it is definitely one of the most challenging pieces of theatre that I've ever come across. It epitomises in-your-face theatre. It's a brutal play. It's a vision of war. It's a vision of a society at war, but it's viewed through very intimate, very personal acts of extreme violence, and it's uncompromising in its brutality. It is a tough watch. It's a tough read, to be fair, as well, but it is definitely a tough watch. Although it's never mentioned directly in the text, it was written, at the time when the war in Bosnia was happening, and Kane has cited that in interviews as an influence. And I think if you kind of, read that with that historical context in mind, it is evident. As I say, it's extremely difficult to watch and read. The first time I read it, I didn't really know what to make of it, and to a point, I still don't. But I sense there was something important about it. There was something, I was intrigued by it in terms of the presentation of the issues, and the graphic nature of it, and the power of it, and also the fact that it was crossing lines in theatre that hadn't really been crossed before. You'd had some stuff that had caused major controversy, certainly back in the 70s, some pieces by Howard Brenton and Edward Bond. There had been things that caused major controversy. But this was another level. It's full of pretty horrible language. Ian is particularly proud of some really horrible misogynistic, racist, homophobic views, and you get a lot of that, and it is very much that's not Kane's view. But that is Ian. That's Ian's character, and there are, as I say, like stage depictions of various different types of violence, including sexual violence, rape. It breaks, as I say, it breaks taboos. It removes the line between kind of what is normal and abnormal in theatre, and kind of challenges us to think about that as the audience. And it was a landmark piece, definitely, of the 90s. It really is one of those where I just can't bring myself to say I like it, because I don't. It's a really difficult one to kind of vocalize my thoughts on it. I love it as a piece of theatre, and I think the writing, again, is incredible from Kane. But yeah, I can't say I like it. It's too horrible for that. It's too difficult to say you like it. But at the same time, I don't dislike it. I think I love it for what it does, and that is to challenge me. It's the most visceral, the most brutal, the most challenging piece that I think I've ever come across in terms of theatre. And it still challenges me to the day, to this day, in terms of some of the stuff that's in it. It's a divisive one. I mean, it's when it first came out at the time, it was it caused a lot of hoo ha. It was branded as I think the most famous quote about it was from a Daily Mail journalist. I think Jack Tinker, I think his name was, which the quote that's just banded around everywhere about it is just a disgusting feast of filth. And Kane was accused of just using shock tactics and that it wasn't anything more than just violence for violence sake. And it's like, no, it's not that. It's really not that. If you look at it, it's absolutely not that. But that doesn't make it any less disturbing in terms of some of the imagery that's in it, some of the language that's used. It does include, as I say, some pretty graphic things, and in the text that is, that's kind of quite. When I read it, it was shocked me to start with, but seeing it is a whole other level. Even though I'd read it several times before I saw it, I don't think I could have prepared myself for the experience of seeing it and seeing those things played out on stage with actors. And of course, with theatre, I think that's one reason why I love theatre, is there's an intimacy in theatre that obviously you don't get in film. It is you're never that far away from the actors as an audience member, and it's live. Those things are playing out right in front of you. So yeah, it's just, as I say, I struggle to sort of say how I feel about it, other than it is, to me, an incredibly important piece. It really kind of showed me what theatre could do, what theatre could be, and that having come from sort of a lot of classics, things like that when I was younger, and at this point I was a theatre student, but still having studied kind of quite a lot of the classics, if you like, even within sort of theatre. This was new. This was completely new to me, this kind of presentation. And so, yeah, as I say, it's just for how thought-provoking it was and still is to me. That's why it's gone onto this list. So yes, that is my pick for number 3. In at number 2, we have The Striker by Carol Churchill from 1994. I've read this multiple times. I have it on digital at the moment, and I've seen it once, and I went for years thinking that I would never get to see this piece because it was never produced, and then it popped up at the Manchester International Festival a few years ago, and I finally got to see it, and it was with Maxine Peake as the Striker as well, and I do like a bit of Maxine Peake. So yeah, it's another one that's kind of difficult to sort of say exactly what it's about, other than it sort of tells the story of an ancient fairy type being, the Striker, who is a shapeshifter, and sort of transforms into various different sort of people and objects as the play progresses, and as it pursues two teenage mothers, Lily and Josie, and how it manipulates and sort of seduces them and kind of entraps them. It's kind of a mix of naturalism and magic realism, And there's some, I suppose there's some horror elements in there as well. It's again, it's a strange mix of stuff, this one. And the language in it is incredible, and that's why I love this one so much. This one's very much about the words on the page. The Skriker itself, whilst it speaks like, you know, kind of a modern English in its interactions with the other human sort of characters, and in its human incarnations, its own language is kind of it's kind of broken and fragmented, sort of word association and puns and lots of other kind of different sort of literary devices are used. Lots of different language devices. The opening monologue of this piece was enough to hook me. I first read it at university when we were doing a module about drama and theatricality, I think it was called. This was one of the pieces that we were looking at, and yeah, within the first page, I knew I was going to love it. The opening monologue kind of sums it up, I think, for me in terms of the language use. It is, if you go to the Amazon page for the Skriker, and look at the sample on the Kindle edition, it is essentially the first few pages of the script, and it gives you the full opening monologue, which is pretty long. But that's the only way really I can sort of say, you know, go and look at it. I can't necessarily describe it, but if you're interested, yeah, go and have a look at that. But yeah, that was enough to hook me. That writing. I also love the names of some of the characters. You've got characters like Rawhead and Bloody Bones, all one word. Johnny Squarefoot and Nelly Longarms, and all these kind of strange like creatures, characters that come from like the underworld that the Skriker is from. So yeah, the language is incredibly interesting in terms of its structure. In various places, but it's, you know, there's poetry to it as well. It's just a really fascinating writing style, this one, for me. The stage directions as well are like integral to the reading. They're not just instructions. They create a part of the wordplay, a part of the feel of the world, the feel of the piece. Although there are some, you know, kind of very magical stage directions, if you like things like, you know, gold coins fall from her mouth, and then like frogs tumble from her mouth, and you know, again with my, like, you know, producer's hat on, if you like, my technical hat on, it was one that I kind of read and kind of went, I want to see this, but how the hell are you going to produce this? Because although yes, some stuff will be, you know, done using you can do some stuff with effects, and you know, some of it will be stylized, you know, or, you know, it's kind of symbolic. There's a magic to it in terms of both the theme and the feel, and so you'd want to create that. I think that magic, or I certainly would. You know, I'd want to be able to create some of that magic. And so yeah, for me, it was one where I kind of went, oh, how would you stage this? It was a puzzle. It's a puzzle of a play. It really is a puzzle of a play. Yeah, it's magical. It's intriguing. It's like nothing I'd ever come across before and since, I think. And when I finally got to see it, it was just as magical an experience as I hoped it would be. It was completely different from how I'd imagined it in terms of its actual staging. But it was fantastic, and I think it's one of those that when it does get produced, when it does get staged, which does seem to be extremely rare, I think because it is quite a difficult one to do, and it is one of Churchill's, like, not lesser known works, but it's not one of her most famous works like Cloud Nine or Top Girls or something like that, or even something like Vinegar Tom. It's, you know, when it does get done, I think it will always look completely different because it's one that is so like open and free for interpretation in terms of visually. And so in that respect, I think that's another reason why I like it. It is so open. It's about the language and the patter, the rhythm, the magical elements of it. And it is one that it still fascinates me. This one, it's got magic in the writing style for me. It hooked me. Yeah, I will always look out for another production of that one. So yes, that is my pick for number 2. And finally, we made it. At number 1, if you're still with me, thank you. Number 1 is Weldon Rising by Phyllis Nage, which is one of the plays in this volume here. And Weldon Rising was from 1992. I read this, I think, when I was sort of a second year undergrad, so probably like 2000, something like that. And then I directed it as my kind of third year, final year, sort of big project, basically, as a drama student. Which meant I got a bit of budget to do it, which was nice. And I also wrote my undergraduate dissertation on it, and another one of Nage's plays. And this was the only one on this list that was an easy one to put on. This was an immediate, this is my favourite play. Everything else took a lot of wrangling in terms of, whether it was getting on the top 10 or, whereabouts. This one was easy. So yes, it's set in Little West 12th Street in New York's meatpacking district in the 1990s, which I think is an area that perhaps has been gentrified somewhat these days. But then it was a bit more of a seedy area, I believe, and I think basically the red light districts as well. And it follows 6 characters. Natty Weldon, who is a gay man, somewhat kind of distressed by his average looks and dealing with the loss of his boyfriend Jimmy, who is another one of the characters that we meet, although only in flashbacks. We've got Tilly and Jay, who are a lesbian couple, I think in their early 30s, who live in a flat above Little West 12th Street where everything's set. And we've got Marcel, who I think has to be my favourite character in this. Marcel is a transvestite prostitute, but is described very much as, very much a man, not at all effeminate, I think are the words that Nage used in the character descriptions in here. And then you've got Boy. Boy is partly described in here as he's always very polite, but she's a dark character, and the sum of all fears, I think, is what she used in here as part of the description. And he is the perpetrator of the homophobic murder of Jimmy, Natty's boyfriend. And this is about the consequences of inaction, basically the consequences of not doing enough. The characters witness this homophobic murder of Jimmy by Boy, but they fail to do much to prevent Jimmy's death. Natty runs away. Natty is with Jimmy at the time that it takes place, but he runs away. Tilly and Jay, they call the police, but they just kind of look on from their flat. They don't go down into the street where Jimmy's bleeding to death. And Marcel is kind of wrapped up in his own stuff. And it's kind of looking at, how they deal with the isolation that comes from this kind of guilt, how it affects their relationships. But also the kind of, it's a hopeful piece. It starts off quite bleak, and, it's got some challenging imagery in it in terms of, homophobic murder. which you see more than once because you get different kind of versions of flashback. But it's about, you know, these characters coming to grips with their you know, their reactions. Can be quite a surreal. It's quite a surreal play. It's, you know, it's got some interesting devices in it, some interesting theatrical devices in it. It's quite apocalyptic in its tone throughout the piece. The heat rises. There is a lot of description of the heat rising to like crazy levels. You know, there's radio broadcasts that kind of keep you know, keep track and kind of keep bulletins that tell you that the heat's risen again. You know, to the point where, you know, metal melts and, you know, planes explode in the sky and things like that. It's got a very particular kind of pattern to the writing. There is notes within it to say that it should be delivered in a very certain way. So there is a kind of a very lyrical, poetic nature to it. It is a beautifully written piece. It really is. As I say, whilst it starts off bleak, I mean, it's also very funny in parts. It's got a real good dark humour to it, quite an acerbic humour, certainly from Marcel. And Marcel only ever talks about himself in the third person as well, and it kind of almost makes it more humorous, almost drier in some ways, his wit. But yeah, it has humour to it, but it certainly ends with like a lot of hopefulness, and certainly messages of kind of love and forgiveness and connection, which is something that the characters don't have at the beginning. You know, even Tilly and Jay are a couple, but there's not really a connect. There's a something lacking there in terms of connection. And Natty's very much on his own in the middle of the street. You know, kind of he speaks a lot to himself, or, you know, there's a lot of sort of monologues. Marcel is very much kind of removed, you know, through choice. Kind of removed. He stands, you know, kind of looking for cars to stop, to be, you know, for a job, basically, for a trip. That there is, you know, there is a lot of disconnect at the beginning, and as the play builds, and certainly in the climax, you've really got this feeling of connection and, as I say, forgiveness and hope, even though the world's like, you know, ending essentially. It's a very powerful piece. The music in it as well is integral when you produce it. It's one of the. This is one of those where you read the music choices, you know, especially when say with the director's hat on. I remember reading the music choices and then listening to the music choices. You got things in there like "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real" by Sylvester, and "Could It Be Magic" Donna Summer. And I remember us listening to it with the sound designer when we were kind of getting ready for putting it on and sorting all that stuff out, and kind of going, really? Because it didn't feel like it fitted. And then we got it in production with, you know, the actors and the set, and, you know, as the play builds in its entirety, and it's genius. It works so well. Because I was worried that it kind of almost takes some of the oomph out of the ending, but actually, like the Donna Summer is what's used for the climax of the play, and it was one of those where like there was barely a dry eye in the house when it had finished. It was one that seemed to really affect people. You know, and it certainly affected me, absolutely. I can't listen to either Sylvester, the "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real," or the Donna Summer without getting a bit choked up. It kind of it's quite an emotional one for me to talk about this. It's one where I can't necessarily really fully vocalize why I love it so much. I can tell you the bits I like about it and the bits I value about it in terms of its structure and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of why I have such a connection to it, why I have such a deep kind of love for it. It's like something just in my gut, in my heart, that it just got its claws in when I first read it and just hasn't let go. And those claws have only sunk deeper through producing it. It changed me, I think. It changed me. It made me think about myself. Both the text and the experience of producing it as well. It's I think it's an incredible piece that doesn't get talked about enough. As I say, In Your Face Theatre tends to focus, when people talk about it, tends to focus often a lot on people like Sarah Kane and Mark Ravenhill and even Anthony Nielsen. But Naj's work flew under the radar a little bit more, I think. I mean, Naj has gone on to do some amazing stuff, and a lot of sort of screenplays. Like she wrote the screenplay for Carol, which was based on the Patricia Highsmith novel, and she's written various other screenplays over the years, I believe, and has recently directed her first film. So she kind of ended up in film, but as a playwright, she's written some incredible stuff, and this Weldon Rising to me is the best, I think. So yes, as I say, I can't really fully vocalise why this has such an effect on me, but it does. And as I say, it was an easy number one, an absolutely clear winner on this list of my top 10 favourite plays. So there we go, that's my number one. And so we've made it. Thank you very much. If you are still with me, I really appreciate it. Goodness knows how long I've been talking for. This is, my voice tells me quite a while. But as I say, I can talk at the best of times, and when it comes to plays, I think thinking about this and also having a couple of little conversations with other folks on BookTube who are also fans of plays, or playwrights or what have you, or both, has kind of really kicked my love of this form of writing back into action. It's been a long time since I'd really properly read through lots of stuff and thought about it. I've been out of the theatre industry for a good 10 years now. And although I've been to see stuff, it's not the same, I think. You don't read stuff and think about stuff in the same way. And so it's been lovely to get back into that. And so, yes, do let me know if you want to see more stuff on plays from me, because I can quite happily talk about them, obviously. But yeah, if you've got any questions about any of these, or you want any more information or what have you, or if you know any of these and have similar or differing opinions on them, do drop them in the comments below. But yes, thank you again for sticking with me for what will no doubt be a rather a long video. And if you enjoyed it, please do consider giving us a like. And subscribing perhaps for future content. I promise it won't be this long every time. But for now, I'm going to go and get a drink and something to eat. But yeah, for now, from me, that's ta-ra.